or that you think is the same, or something, you know, what do you think could be measured about philosophy students? Testing doesn't need to be measured at the beginning of class, it doesn't need to be measured at the end of class. We're talking a written thing. Multiple choice. Usually multiple choice works better.
How much do they actually like it from the beginning? At the beginning, how much do they actually like it at the end, or how much will they use it in this real life? In the real life, at the end.
Philosophy isn't something that you mentally apply. It's kind of.
Well, what you're asking for their opinion about the future, and I've always found those kinds of things like very unreliable. Like, how much do you plan on spending for Christmas?
Yeah.
You know,
I think they've done a test, and it's like 80%.
Yeah,
people only stick with what they say they'll do 80% of the time. So you have like.
So ask about how much they liked what they learned.
See, here's the thing. I think it's better to actually, rather than ask them what they learned, test what they learned.
Yeah. Because if you ask people, oh yeah.
How many people are familiar with the Dunning-Kruger effect?
I believe what?
Dunning-Kruger?
Not me.
It is the sort of trend for stupid people to think that they're smarter than they really are. Well, that is something that, I mean, it doesn't necessarily mean that we have to apply just to stupid people. It's generally that people that are not very capable tend to overrate their capabilities, and people that are more capable tend to underrate their capabilities.
All right, so now we need to operationalize. That's usually what happens in the first element. The first thing is operationalizing this issue. And that means you need to come up with a quantitative way of testing for that effect. And that is, so you have to think about, okay, do you know how to do X? And then immediately we test for X. Then
you could just ask what they think their grades are.
But here's the thing.
That would be before each test, or in your case, like with each analysis.
Because then you have to analyze each grade individually. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that is a lot of work.
And plus, there's, you know, and then the obvious answer to that is, well, why do you think this is any different in a philosophy class? I mean, that's why I think you want to go for what a philosophy class is. What's unique about it? Why are we bothering out in a philosophy class as opposed to a geography class? And you know, if you think about, you know, the philosophy class is supposed to be imparting, you know, something else.
Did your morality value change?
Yeah, or something like that.
Moral value change, like maybe you take a specific type of issue,
right?
And the change of stance on it, and why? Maybe.
Right. So and then that's more easily done because those kind of questionnaires are already out there. And you can do trolley questions. You can do these questions, these sort of lifeboat questions. Yeah, basically lifeboat questions and stuff like that. And then ask them at the end of the class. And one thing you can do is you can measure just changes in intuition. You can just measure that, right? So, you know, 4 people on the lifeboat, one's got to go. Is it moral to kick off the one who is the sickest, sort of thing, right? Then you can see that whether that has changed over the span of the course.
Can you use the same questions though?
Well,
because I mean, if someone
exactly the same question, because
if you said that and then you said the X, people will be like, oh, it's
that's
so
why you have
to
to have
that one person.
You have to have multiple questions getting at the same construct. That is, you have to have a few questions at least that get at the same thing you want to test for. So, you know, you can be more or less sure that. So what you do is you give one batch of questions,
and then
another batch of questions.
Which
how about the Searle killing his wife?
The thing is, that requires too much of a backstory.
Well, not really. I mean, you're teaching in Philosophy 4, you're going to be teaching about Searle, and specifically about his Chinese room. And of course, you could always change it to Searle goes Kung Fu on his grad students to make it a little bit less.
The thing is, if you make it tied to the content, then the risk is what you're going to get is a gauge of the absorption of the content. Whereas, you know what I mean, and if we want to test multiple classes.
It could be used, though, as a more general argument of, you know, is somebody who's doing that responsible, or is it just a program that they're executing that's, you know.
Here's the question then is, okay, so if we're going to do it with lots of classes, not necessarily only just philosophy of mind classes, right? Are you want to mix that into the bundle here, or See, it sounds so pointed because it's going after a particular reading in a particular class, whereas you're not going to get good results experimentally that way.
Well, it has ethical applications, and
No, but here's the question is, are you going to get an informed result, or are you going to get a lot of students picking number 3, which is no opinion? Right? So there are different ways of doing these kinds of tests, and that is, one is you give a multiple choice test, a person one person, or two, you give them sort of self-examination thing, which is on a Likert scale, which is agree strongly, where it's usually disagree strongly, disagree somewhat, no opinion, agree somewhat, agree strongly.
Don't most people just stay in like the middle 3 for those?
No, depends on the question. So you have to think about what it is, think of something odd that you would never think, like what would be an interesting result, if you could find, what would be weird, that people who take philosophy class end up being more selfish. That would be weird, or
sexually liberated.
something like that. Yeah, something like literally off the tangent. That's the kind of thing that makes it interesting. You want to divorce it from the content of the class as much as possible, because then you can't say that we were teaching to that test. But then you can't say, well, duh, right? That's like two students do better on adding numbers after an arithmetic class. But it would be an interesting result. Is it, something like that, or people find that they wake up later in the day, or I don't know, something weird like that. That strikes me as more bizarre. And sort of think of someone reading this, right? Think of someone reading things and go, whoa, who would have thought, right? That's the kind of thing you're looking for. Is, whoa, I would have never guessed that. But the problem, of course, is that you have to live or die by the results, right? That is, you can put a lot of work into this questionnaire, and giving the questions, and getting the questions, and analyzing the questions. We do it on Scantron, of course, so it's a lot faster. But you can still do a lot of work and find out nothing. No result at all, or nothing that rises above the level of chance. So, you have, and this is what researchers have to deal with all the time. If you've got two kind of competing things, and one is, whoa, that would be so cool if it were true, and it would make me, and it would make a name for myself. Two is, maybe the reason it would be so cool if it were true is that it's not true. That is, that's the reason it seems so cool, because it's so counterintuitive. Do I want to waste a significant amount of my time and chunk of my life in something that may well result in a null hypothesis? Being, you can't rule out the null hypothesis. But think of things that are think of things about generally, what you would think education ought to be about. Closed-mindedness, that kind of stuff.
Is there a larger pool that we could go to for questions of some sort? I mean, do we?
Yeah, well, it depends on the construct. It depends on what you're interested in. Research, anything in social psychology, that's where you do a sort of literature thing. Closed-minded, open-mindedness is studied a lot, and there are questionnaires for that. And there are, you can use the Big Five. That's the most well-studied, one of the most well-studied social science constructs. There are 5 personality dimensions, and people vary on that. It would be interesting to see if people change in any of those dimensions over time. That is, over the course of time. And the number that you get grows. That is, the more people you have, the more you can rule out things like, well, some people are going to get more introverted as the semester goes on, blah, blah, blah. That's why you need lots of numbers. So that would be a bizarre, interesting result. If you got any change at all on any of them, did they become more neurotic after taking the philosophy class? That would be interesting. And there are lots of, these are things we can get, Big Five questionnaires. And they're long enough to where you can divide it in 10.
I'd be interested too, because I've noticed on some of the bulletin boards I go on that there's almost a seasonal trend that you can see through the school year of what people are studying and their confusion and not understanding that they're studying these things to rebut them or to refute them and not to agree with them.
I think that's something to be kind of curious, to do a standard Big Five questionnaire on, everyday cases, you can do all of that stuff, why not? And you can sub-aggregate about see which class induced the biggest change. Was 2 more likely to induce changes on the various personalities